Oof. All right, I'm going to try and warm up as much as I can, panel, but they're yours in 5 minutes. Good luck. Hey now, I'm Dr. Dennis Stepanowski. Great to see you all. Proud superintendent. Thanks for coming out tonight. All right. We've got a few people to introduce. First of all, we've got two board members here, Leslie Stein and Linda Menges, right there. Two of my senior members of the leadership team, Hallie Chambers, Dr. Ryan Gleason. From the school, you've got Principal Bennett Wutke and Assistant Principal John Wells. And the lady of the hour, she helped put this presentation panel discussion together last year in April. I was at, it was fantastic, and helped make tonight possible. Give it up for your own PFC president, Amy Grayson. Where's Amy? Stand up, Amy. Wave to the people. All right. And of course, if you're out in the lobby, we have the amazing students from the Culinary Arts Program and Chef Alan. Give it up to our students out in the lobby. Okay, I'll get to the panel in 1 second. Probably something on your mind. Oh, we are offering you, by the way, the full Yondr experience. So let me offer a little bit of language here. This is my second Yondr experience. I was at the Greek and had the opportunity, I think we had an audience of 5,000 or so, 7,000 or so, for a comedian, and they gave everyone a Yondr bag there. It was a very interesting experience. So Yondr's providing a phone-free experience for this event tonight, so you can experience the sense of freedom and focus. Focus on the great jokes tonight. Focus a device-free space that we're offering you tonight. However, if you need, of course, to get to your phone at any point during the event, feel free. The Yondr table's outside with the magnets to undo those. So let's give it up to Yondr and the experience tonight. Often what we get is, what's Las Virgenes up to? And so we're so glad to have DopaMind back. The presentation in April was fantastic. I was really moved by the panel discussion and the data they shared. Some of the slides, and I see a lot of presentations, some of the slides I will never forget. I do remember the one slide vividly where you shared that with the introduction of the cell phone, the smartphone, I think around 2005, worldwide academic achievement scores have done nothing but this since that time. So if you can imagine, I think we're going to look back on social media and it'll be like sort of the cigarettes of our time. Remember there was a time when they thought smoking cigarettes was a good idea, and there were advertisements and doctors endorsing and that kind of thing. So my recommendation, I've got a 20 and a 19-year-old, so I've been through the battle, but if I had younger children, I would go wait till 8. So that's, pro tip for you out there. What is Las Virgenes up to? The board met before school even started in August and essentially voted unanimously to be more aggressive with enforcing the policies we had in place, which are essentially banning the phones from the classroom. So phones are right now off and away at all of our levels. We're not done there, but we so appreciate the board setting clear directions. We are probably going to be piloting a couple different systems, and Yondr will probably be one of those systems. And we'll try it on some grade levels, we'll try it at some specific schools. But the school board was 100% behind this. They are 100% focused on student success, wellness, health, and of course our number one priority would be academics. So please give it up to the school board for their leadership and direction on this issue. That's where Las Virgenes is at right now. We've really been leading in this topic for some area. We have a K-8 school called Mariposa. My children went there, and it is what's known as a low-tech school. So the entire family will sign a contract, and you'll do screen-free weeks for the children in the school and the parents at home. And so you're reading books, you're going for walks. It was a fantastic experience. My children, as I said, 20 and 19, they call Mariposa Amish school. We joke about it. They actually work on knitting and fine motor skills, which was all a fantastic experience for them, and they're doing quite well in college. I remember being a little kid and having this unique experience, and maybe you had it too. My grandparents lived in Pittsburgh, I was in Philadelphia. Go, where's my Eagles fan? Go Eagles. And there you go. I've got two Philadelphia folks on the panel here. One's an Eagles fan. And one knows that the Eagles are?
Kinda. I don't follow it.
They're some kind of sports ball team.
Yeah, sports ball, right?
Exactly, sports ball. So I live in Philly. My grandparents were in Pittsburgh, 7-hour drive in our satellite custom station wagon with that kind of seat that flips up in the back, that you stare backwards, like with no seat belts, really not safe at all. And I remember experiencing this thing. And I didn't know at the time, but it was really powerful. It was called boredom. And that's really important. Just let your mind go. Let your brain free up, right? Not have stuff screaming for your attention all the time. I would nap, I would read, and I would be bored. I would look out the window, think about the world, and just experience that. I think that's such a powerful gift, and obviously these expensive and powerful devices we have in our pockets, their number one mission, and I'm sure you'll hear tonight, is to get our attention, to get children's attention. Now, it's one thing when you're 56, it's one thing, when you're 8, 9, and 10. So, without further ado, we are excited to have this amazing panel here in front of you, and let me introduce these fine folks. First up is Graham Dugoni. All right, Graham is the CEO of Yondr, a company he founded 10 years ago in 2014, pioneered the concept of phone-free spaces through building products that help creativity and productivity flourish. Today, Yondr is the established industry leader in helping educators, artists, families, organizations, and businesses all around the world create phone-free spaces of their own. Graham. Titania. Jordan. Titania is the Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Patent Officer for Bark Technologies, an online safety company that helps keep kids safe online and in real life. A renowned thought leader on digital parenting, she has contributed to pieces in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Huffington Post, Fox Business, Daily Mail, USA Today, Vogue, and many, many more. Her first book, Parenting in the Tech World, was published in 2020 and quickly became a bestseller on Amazon. Welcome. Seán Killingsworth is a digital wellness speaker and activist. He founded the Reconnect movement in high school, which helps inspire and organize young people to create clubs on their campuses that prioritize face-to-face interactions. Seán. Ben Pallas is an accomplished youth leader in the field of digital wellness. He previously served as communications director at Youth People's Alliance, a youth movement focused on student-led advocacy, working to mobilize young people to achieve electoral and policy outcomes. I love that. He's been heavily influenced by the contextual behavior sciences and is currently co-authoring a book with Dr. Mavis Sai on the principles of living with awareness, courage, and love. Ben. Szabo is a leading voice of the youth mental health education. As a director of the National Mental Health Awareness Campaign, he created the first National Youth Mental Health Speakers Bureau, a program that has inspired millions to address their mental health. Ross is also an award-winning speaker, has addressed over 2 million people with his keynotes, including recent TED Talks. He is the co-author of Behind Happy Faces, Taking Charge of Your Mental Health, used as common reading at multiple universities, and author of a kid's book about anxiety, which was featured on Oprah's Favorite Things list. Ross. And our moderator, Aniko Hill, is a veteran social media marketer and digital wellness educator. She owns and operates the award-winning creative agency, The Kitchen Collaborative, where she utilizes her extensive experience building award-winning brands in a wide range of industries, with an emphasis on helping companies market and advertise their products online through nurturing meaningful connections with their audiences. She is a co-founder and executive director of this program, DopaMind, a kids' digital wellness nonprofit organization working to empower kids and their caregivers to create healthy relationships with technology through content, education, and events. Here we go.
Can I give that one back to you?
Everyone's got one.
And I think, I'm on. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to be showing a few slides back here. They relate a little bit loosely to what we'll be talking about, so feel free to check them out, but you don't have to. I'm going to start with Seán, and I would love for you to explain what is the collective action problem and how can schools help solve it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the collective action problem is a very key piece of this issue because a lot of people focus on, the individual side of this issue, which, phones are so addicting and, they hurt our mental health and we spend so much time on them and we need to have better screen time habits. But, this issue as a whole really can't be just approached individually because, in my experience, I got a flip phone in high school to improve my individual problems, right? So I went perfect habits, no phone. But that didn't help me with the collective action problem, which was, I was going back into a high school full of students that were all still on their phones. So, I became isolated and excluded because I didn't have my phone. So, you see real change when the whole school is phone-free, bell to bell, because that creates, an ecosystem and an environment that actually allows for students to thrive socially without their phones. So, because the problem is if you put your phone down, you don't have anywhere to go without your phone. So going phone-free and rebuilding that environment is what allows students to actually put their phones down and have something to join into. So.
Thank you so much. I'm going to jump to you, Graham. Why do we need phone-free spaces? It's a bit of a philosophical question.
Sure. Well, I think to that collective action kind of problem, I think everybody's wrestling with this question at an individual level and a collective level. What's the proper role of technology in modern life? And I think 10 years ago, that was kind of the hypothesis that I jumped off from, was how do we help orient, especially a younger generation, into an experience that they've never had. Digital natives stepping through the world with a smartphone in their pocket is a very different experience than not having a computer in your pocket. So to me, creating phone-free spaces is a tangible way to approach a very nebulous, pervasive problem. Because when someone steps into a phone-free space at a concert, or a student goes to a phone-free school all day, that's a concrete experience. And that's 6 to 8 hours a day without it, which allows people to reflect and gain some separation and perspective on the difference between the digital world and the physical world around them. And I think, to me, that's the fundamental lesson that has to be passed on and ultimately adopted and run with by this younger generation, is the difference between the digital world and the online world and how to navigate them, because that's going to be their task to figure out and to solve. But I thought it was my generation's responsibility to at least provide the experience so they can distinguish between the two.
Thank you. Ross, my question to you is, let's jump to adolescents here. I know you work with adolescents and you're a mental health expert, so how do you think the rapid rise of modern screen technology has affected adolescents specifically?
There's a couple of ways that the digital brain is affecting people. One is we do see higher rates of anxiousness, nervousness, feelings of being depressed, loneliness, and all of these other aspects. But really what screens do, phones are obviously an extension of that, is it only activates our limbic system. And when we're activating our limbic system, we're in a perpetual state of fight or flight. So you don't need sleep, you don't need water, you don't need food, you don't need to go to the bathroom, because your brain is being so activated by the phone and the dopamine hit that you're so alert, you're just not taking care of yourself. And what that has done, obviously, in schools is created a dynamic where students are a lot more impulsive and they have lower attention spans, but they're also not aware of the underlying current that's happening to them. And so they're simultaneously being exposed to a lot of things they never should have been exposed to at this age, and adults aren't giving them the coping skills that they need to take care of it, and then adults are also blaming them for not having coping skills. It's a situation that doesn't work. And so what we've tried to do at Geffen Academy, my school, is create a program where students learn about mental health once a week, every week as part of their education, so that they can just be better prepared for the challenges and the realities of the world that they are facing, and so they can develop the skills they need for their future.
Thank you. Titania, I want to jump to safety a little bit. So what are some of the main safety issues surrounding youth smartphone use? And I'm going to put the bark data up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's important. And I'm going to start my timer so I keep it concise. Because there's a lot, right? I mean, we can address the elephant in the room, with the latest tragedy that happened in Yondr, Georgia, not too far from where I live, Appalachia High School. There's a danger in children being distracted from following the instruction of adults or law enforcement that are there to help keep them safe. There's also the danger of phones dinging and pinging when there is an active shooter that would direct their attention to that noise and make them a victim instead of alive. It's one that, it's hard to talk about, but we're all worried about it. Then on a macro level, there's the lack of connection, the lack of authentic connection in children at a very young age when they need to be developing those interpersonal skills. There is the lack of just good decision making when children have this very powerful tool and they're using it to hurt others. Good kids make bad choices, and I couldn't imagine what bad choices I might have made in 5th grade if I had a supercomputer that could take photos and videos. Sexting is the new first base in middle school. Nudes of children are going around the school, and that's against the law. Outside of the relational and reputational issues, there are legal consequences for this. It's affecting attendance. Children that aren't sleeping at night because of screens are then coming to school not optimally ready to face the day or face each other. The recording of children in the bathroom, recording fights instead of asking an adult for help. It's a weapon. It's not a source of connection. It's a weapon, and it's really disheartening.
Yeah, and I'll just add a lot of these things that, we're looking at up here. Many of these mistakes that you've talked about that kids have made have existed. Now we're just supercharging them all, right? And allowing good kids to make bad mistakes and have them be permanent out there in the world. So it's just, it's really tough time to be growing up. Okay, Ben, so speaking of growing up in this generation,
Okay.
would you tell us what age you were when you got your first smartphone? And then how do you think your life would have been different had you not grown up with it? It's probably hard to imagine.
Sure, okay. First off, can I just ask, can I not have slides? Or I guess I will. I just feel so distracted by the slides. I want to look at all
You don't
of them.
have to look.
I know. Okay, before I go into it, I'm just curious. Could you raise your hand if you're in high school still? Cool, okay, so we have some. And if you're under 25, so that means you grew up with a phone. If you're under 25, raise your hand. Okay, cool, all right. You guys are the people I'm primarily talking to here. Parents, extremely important, but I want to speak to you guys because we have a shared experience here. I remember when I was in 8th grade, I cried to my mom, I need a phone to belong. That's what I told her, right? Everyone else had one. I imagine you guys here have had a similar experience. In a way, I was kind of right. A lot of people did have it, and I really did feel like I needed to belong. At the same time, a lot of the people here know that it doesn't make you immune to feeling like you are lonely or that you don't fit in. In fact, you can quite exacerbate it. I remember one of the loneliest periods of my life was a little bit later on in college, and I felt incredibly alone. And part of what exacerbated it is because instead of spending time with people or acknowledging that I felt lonely, I'd scroll on my phone. I was so busy. I saw school and all these other things. I didn't have time for anything yet. I'd still make my appointment, right before bed, my 3 to 5 hour appointment of scrolling on my phone, right? And so, I don't know what my life would be like if I didn't have a phone growing up. I don't know when, but I know that I just stepped on the school again and I could feel it. I mean, you want to fit in so bad. I remember what it was like being in high school. Oh my God, it was so thick in the air, you can almost reach out and touch it, right? And when you put it on social media and you get all these kids and all this time, it's so much worse. I mean, I remember high school kids were like vipers, and and So if I didn't have a phone, or if social media wasn't such a dominant force in my life, I think it would be a lot more focused on what I care about. Not the stupid stuff that's going on around me, but my values around connecting with other people, around my hobbies, my interests, and less about what some popular kid said. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Seán, so we touched on this a little bit already, but in the real world, kids learn and gain experience from making mistakes. They do this in small groups with very low stakes. You make a mistake around your friends, it's probably going to be forgiven, moved on pretty quickly. In the virtual world, small mistakes can have huge consequences because of the exposure to the widespread criticism from this huge audience, potentially billions of people, right? So again, what was it like growing up during this intense time of scrutiny, which these kids are still growing up in now?
Yeah, so the constant possibility to be filmed and posted is one of the huge reasons that phones pollute social environments, and they don't allow for a healthy social ecosystem to exist because, you know, the constant possibility of being filmed and posted, it just kills, you know, the desire to go out on a limb and do something goofy or, you know, try to say something funny or put yourself out there, be yourself. So, you know, because if you know that if you do something that's funny enough or that is good, you're going to get filmed, you're going to get posted, and that's kind of inevitable. And so you know that's going to get seen by your friends, and then you know that's going to be seen by who your friends know, and then it could even go to your whole school or, like you said, to millions of people. And that's just constantly present. So at each of those levels, you're subjected to, you know, an out of the moment and an after the fact judgment and this level of scrutiny, where it's not just the people that are there in the present moment, but it could be like a video clip that wasn't even the full thing that you did. It could be a little bit of the end of it that's out of context, and now you're a laughing stock just for trying to be yourself. So, you know, that being present at all times creates a fear that's just an underlying layer in all interactions. And, you know, how would you feel if you were, you know, constantly being filmed? You know, would you be able to just goof off and have fun with your friends? No, you would be anxious about everything you say and do. And so that's what we're experiencing. And, you know, I can't speak for what kids in school are experiencing now, but that's what I felt like when I was in high school. And, you know, the worst part is that we've never grown up with anything different. We've never known what it's like to not have that constant fear there. So a lot of the kids in my generation and younger might be anxious, and they don't even know that that's why they feel so anxious, because we've just never known a world without it.
I'm going to jump to Graham and kind of push on this a little bit. So how does the phone-free movement help young people feel free from scrutiny? Seán touched on it a little bit, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way to put it is what Seán just described is exactly why I started Yondr. Is that, to me, looking at the way technology was going, the dominant ideas, what it represented, the idea of everything being connected everywhere all the time, I don't think is an idea that had really been examined, what the implications were going to be. And now they're finally starting to kind of come to the surface. So for me, creating phone-free spaces is a way to address all those things. It's a way to introduce a younger generation to the freedom and the exploration that happens when the world is not mediated through something else, when things are not being filmed and recorded and posted out of context, and the kind of, I don't know, dampening effect that has on people's ability to be intimate or express themselves. I think it's true at a concert for adults. We see it all the time. We'll do a 25,000 person show, and you watch people step through, and you watch people react as they're adjusting to a new habit. They're reaching for their phone, they're a little nervous, and then after 5 or 10 minutes, people adjust, they forget about it, and they act normally, and then the show builds, and it becomes something incredible, what a show can be. And I think it's the same in school. So when you look at this big question of collective action, and how do you approach that question, to me, phone-free spaces, again, is a concrete way to allow people to experience the freedom of what that's like and carry it with them forward so they can make their own decisions. So that's kind of how I view it.
Thank you. Ross, I'm going to come back to you. Let's talk about loneliness. We've touched on it a little bit. Surgeon General has declared an epidemic of loneliness very recently. So why does modern stream technology make us feel more lonely?
The thing I want to point out about this too is Surgeon General put the loneliness epidemic out for all people.
Yeah.
I know that we're talking about young people, and obviously the development of the brain and technology on young people is important. But let's be honest, adults are as addicted to phones as kids are. And senior citizens may be even more addicted to phones than adults are. The amount of times I have to ask my mom to not send money to people, to not do all this other stuff because the internet isn't real is a factor, right? And so when we look at the loneliness epidemic, if you go deeper into it, what you find is that attached to the loneliness epidemic is an overstimulation epidemic. That we are so overstimulated now that when we're not stimulated, we feel lonely. And that loneliness is real, and we can't just tell people you're not lonely. But we wouldn't have as high of a rate of loneliness if we weren't overstimulated. Going back to what the superintendent shared in the beginning, he used to know what boredom was like. But even now as an adult, I'm still tempted to check my phone. And even now, for me, at my age, I can feel lonely, and then I'll realize, like, oh, I actually talked to like 30 people today, outside of teaching and everything else, right? And so that's what's often being missed, is we're focusing so much on the loneliness, the anxiety, the depression, everything else, but at the source of it is technology. At the source of it is all screens, because it is not just phones that are doing this to our brains, it's any screen is activating your limbic system and giving you that stimulation, and then when you don't have it, you're feeling lonely.
Yeah. So, Ben, can I ask you what young people can do to consciously reconnect with their peers and avoid that loneliness?
I describe it the main way is quality.
Don't look.
Quality over quantity. So about 40%, you can cite me on this, tell me if I'm wrong here, but about 41% of young people are feeling lonely nowadays. So if we were to just imagine that, I'm like thinking that's probably like right around there, and all the people over here, all you guys are going to be like the lonely people, and then maybe the people over here are the not so lonely people. The main difference between these guys and these guys is these guys have close, strong ties. So it's people who love them and they love them, but they're close. It's someone that, family members, friends, relationships, whatever it is, but people that you're close to, and less so in this bucket here, right? Now, I have 250,000 followers on TikTok. Like that's not flex. Like I post to help people get off. But anyways, I can tell you from that perspective, it doesn't matter how many followers you get. If you're in this camp, the quantity of people that you're interacting with will never scratch that itch that just a few people who care for you and love you and that you feel connected with will. So that's really important. It's the quality of the relationship. Social media will try and get you to connect with a bunch of people. You'll get 1,000 followers or whatever it is, right? Whatever big number. But that doesn't matter, right? If you have if you've been in a family, if you've been in a relationship and you've had friends, you know that takes time and effort and commitment. It takes conflict resolution. It takes clarifying misunderstandings. Like, I didn't mean it like that. It was just a joke or whatever it is. Like, you have to put effort into that. And you can't do that with everybody. You can't do that with 1,000 people or 250,000 people. But you can do that with people that you love. You can do that with your dearly, right? The people who you hold dear. And so find your close ties, find your tribe, and invest in those relationships before you invest in, being an influencer or whatever else you want to do. So, anyways, that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Titania, let's talk about social exclusion. Really hard for kids, which we've covered a little bit. Also very hard for parents. So how can parents and teens manage the social exclusion that comes from differences in either the pace of technology introduction or choices regarding what media they use in their own families?
You give me the hard questions. Just kidding, kind of. But there's a few things I want to squeeze in here. First is I'm the mom of an almost 16-year-old, and children are really good salespeople, and they will pull on your heartstrings. My son is an only child and knew that I kind of feel guilty about that, right? I wish he had siblings, and he didn't want to be left out. which is his primary argument for why he wanted a smartphone, TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. And I wish, in hindsight, I would have known what I know now. And in fact, I did let him be left out, because while he would have been left out of some Snapchat messages and some text threads that, you know, had 20 kids in it, he would also have been left out of so many toxic conversations, bullying, exposure to content and people that were not good for him. We need, as parents and caregivers, to be the parent and to be the caregiver and let our children be left out of things that they don't need to be a part of. Later is longer. They have the rest of their lives when they're more mature and have had those solid foundations to delve into the world of tech. Children need to have a childhood. They need to develop those critical skills, emotional, physical, all of them, before they're thrown for a loop. Slides. There's so much to say here, but our children are really at a disadvantage right now, and we have to step up and collectively take care of them. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I probably spent at least an hour on Instagram today. I set a time limit for myself, and it still baffles me that I spend more than that on that platform a day, but here we are. I can't tell you what I saw on there. A whole hour of my life that I will never get back. I can't tell you. But what I can tell you are memories of moments. The time I got to spend with my dad at the lake a few weeks ago for his birthday. We're never going to surface to each other like, you remember that reel? You remember that TikTok? You remember that viral YouTube? No, it's remember that conversation, that moment, that birthday, that hug, and that's what we have to get back to.
Yeah, and I'm going to bait you a little bit here, Sean, but I know you and I have talked about this. As a young person, for like the people, I don't know if there's anybody here that haven't gotten social media yet, don't you think it's actually worse once you get it as a young person?
Like what is worse specifically?
The feeling of social exclusion. So when you don't have it, you're excluded, right? Because you don't have access. But then once you have it, you're physically seeing all the things you weren't invited to, the group texts you weren't part of, things like that.
Yes, definitely. I think that, you know, the feeling, it really is unfortunate. And, you know, one of the reasons that I advocate for phone-free spaces and an entirely phone-free school is because, you know, like you're saying, it's really bad when you are stuck in that isolation of social media, and you know, you're not just alone in that isolation. You're watching all these happy people and all the people you recognize from school be happy, and you know, on top of that, comparing your life and all these things. It's just can be very damaging in that isolating state. But on the other hand, you know, you get rid of that, and now you're just isolated and excluded in a different way. I would say that it was better in a way, but at the same time, you know, I don't want to force, it was unfortunate I had to be in that position where I'm choosing either exclusion and isolation or exclusion and isolation. And I really don't want that to be an issue anymore, and I want phone-free spaces to be a completely normal thing. I think it should be in all schools, but, you know, in society as well, because these things just, you know, we deserve an opportunity to be free of them and still live in a world where we're not, you know, completely polluted with phones everywhere. Like Graham said, dampening all of our in-person experiences as well.
Can I add to that? Is that loud? Am I, or is this not?
You're allowed.
Okay.
Go ahead. I was going to come to you next anyway.
I kind of disagree. I don't think it's like definitively worse if you have a phone or if not. I think there's great things about social media. And I think there's great research by Patty Valkenburg in the University of Netherlands, I think. But anyways, that show that it really depends on the person, right? Some people, when they relate to social media in certain ways, they have much lower well-being. And then other people, it does better. And then when you average them together, you get a weird result. But you have to look at the individual. But my thought is that ultimately, if you have a phone or you don't have a phone, what matters is those close ties. Do you have a good relationship? Do you have close friends? Do you feel like someone out there in the world actually understands you for who you are? You're going to learn those skills either with a phone or without, right? And if you have a phone, I feel like that gets in the way more of you building those close ties than you being without, because there's plenty of things you can do in the real physical world. It's limited on the phone when Mark Zuckerberg is, betting $1 billion on a distraction, right? And then you get a bunch of bad advice on TikTok too. It's like 3 signs that someone's manipulating just the misinformation you get there. It's just like you guys in the back and you guys over there who raise your hand, you guys hopefully know. So I think it depends. I think it can be worse, it can be better. But it's, in my opinion, it's usually better. You just have to learn those skills. That's the most important part.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, without getting totally into this right now, I think, I agree. There's great things about social media that can allow for connection. I just, I think that we need to add in phone-free spaces, because even if you do have those skills and you do have, the best phone habits, you're going into social environments where you're trying to create those close ties, and you're really running into a lot of barriers because everybody does have their phones and people aren't present, in these spaces that you would be trying to make those connections. And that is where we need to add in the extra piece, which is a phone-free space that is actually more conducive with, the social opportunities in person that are being currently, closed off by the presence of phones physically, But both have advantages, of course, and we should take advantage of both while,
totally
not losing either one.
I totally agree.
Aniko, I want to say one very quick thing just on the left out, and that's it really depends again on your age and stage.
Yes.
Snapchat in particular.
Yes.
I cannot think of a reason why an 11-year-old needs to be sitting in their bedroom looking at snap maps, seeing where everybody is, and they're not. I can't think of one good reason.
Yeah, actually, I totally agree. I only think about these guys, but yeah, the younger generations I can't even talk about. I bet it totally fries your brain. I have no, but
Yeah. Yeah, for exclusion specifically, I think our thesis as parents is it's in a way worse once you can see what everybody's doing that you're not invited to. Where if you didn't have it, that hurts too, but you can go home on the weekend and have a respite and maybe hear about it on Monday, but not have it blasted and broadcast in your face all weekend. That's sort of where we're coming at it from the adult point of view, but completely agreeing. We speak to the pros all the time of social media, which I actually think might be here. No. It's coming. But I do want to ask you about the harms, because you're very good at summarizing those. So let's go into the harms of social media.
Okay, so there's generally 2 ways that social media can harm your mental health. The common way that people think about is the one of exposure. So you saw that crazy thing that you didn't want to ever see, but you saw it, and now you can never unsee it, right? You guys know, because I grew up with this, and so we both know the stuff that our parents didn't know that we knew, that we saw, that kind of stuff, but that's one harm, and sometimes you can get some harrowing stuff. These algorithms will capitalize on that sensitivity that you have around food, or not feeling good enough about whatever it is, and they'll run you in the ground with that, right? And I think people know that too. My understanding of it is that's less of the harm of social media. Primarily, the lesser known, lesser talked about harm of social media is the second form, which is opportunity cost. So it's that you're scrolling your phone for 5 hours or whatever it is, and it's the things that you're not doing. So it's you're not sleeping. Oh my God, if you wanted to speed run depression like a video game, don't sleep, don't eat, don't spend time with people, and that's do that every day for hours a day, every day. You could do that, you beat Super Mario Bros. In 5 hours. I don't know whatever the record is, but do that. And then, if you're disconnecting with people, that's one thing. Opportunity cost is huge, right? If you're not sleeping, if you're not taking care of your body, if you're not spending time with people, that's the major thing. And if you're addicted to this thing, that's a big part of it. Attention fragmentation, so not being able to focus. Addiction, again, if you're not in control of yourself, if you are just doing whatever your notifications tell you to do, or whatever you're checking the text that your ex sent you, or that your crush or whatever it is, and you can't focus on the things that you care about, that's a harm, right? That's a real kind of cost. And so opportunity cost is the other thing. It's the things that we're losing when we're being on our phones.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump to, let's see, I think we kind of just covered this. I'm going to jump to Graham again. So let's talk about the mental health aspect of phone-free schools. So schools are citing the youth mental health crisis as one of the main reasons for phone-free policies. And so can you speak to how these policies help improve students' mental health? You guys work in every state in the country. in plus, what, 27, 37 countries? So you have all the data on this.
Yeah, I think it's been amazing to see, again, over 10 years in over 30 different countries, how with different cultural cultures and demographics and all these different places, how similar the foundational issue is. It's been fascinating to see. What we find generally is when we work with the district or state and they're moving to become phone-free in their school, generally there's some hesitation at the beginning, especially from students. Again, we've talked about probably the reasons why. What we generally find after the first 2 to 3 weeks is that students are happier, and they'll admit that. They'll say how happy, how free they feel. We'll hear that clubs at lunch are coming back. The lunchroom is loud and lively again. Students are making more friends. They're connecting with each other. They feel less anxious. All the things we've talked about. And again, that's building up the muscle and developing the facility to go 6 to 8 hours a day and do those things that are very natural for people, but require kind of creating a space to allow those things to flourish. So that's what we hear from phone-free schools, and I think the other maybe aspect that's less discussed related to that is the idea that when students are in person with each other and you're in high school, you're going through a defining period of your life, and it's difficult on its own. But you build up your character, you build up your sense of who you are, your self-identity through those difficult experiences, and you have to go through those. And when you think about the way people interact through a phone, then the impetus to text or to FaceTime someone, it's a path of least resistance. It allows you to engage and pull out of those things that are difficult, that are awkward. It's difficult to sit and talk to someone face-to-face and crack a joke and not know how it's going to land. You have to deal with how that plays on someone else's face right in front of you. Those kinds of experiences are what form you, and you have to go through those if you're going to develop. But if you're developing, I would say, and more of your energy is placed in the online world, what I see happen is that an identity is crafted, but it's a self-curated identity, and it's projected out into the world of what you would like the world to see. That's not rooted in the relationships and the foundational things around you that are going to build up the constellation of your identity. And so, to me, a lot of elements of technology work that way. They are titillating at some level. They provide the salt and fat, but not the meat and potatoes that we need to sustain us as people. And so, again, how do you approach these really difficult philosophical questions? What we've learned, what we've seen, is if you create a phone-free space and allow people to live in it, they resolve themselves very quickly. But that's the foundational experience that maybe, especially a younger generation, should be allowed to feel.
I'm going to come back to you, Ben. Let's talk about focus. So our ability to focus has declined by 69% since 2004. So that's from 2.5 minutes down to 47 seconds. So how do you think modern screen technology affects the ability for young people to focus?
And do it in 47 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. The attention span research, from my understanding of it, limited understanding of it, is pretty limited, right? Like, I hesitate with this idea that, like, we have attention spans of a goldfish, and I think there's reasons for that, because it is contextual. But I do think that research points to a really important finding, which is that people are struggling to be able to attend to, that's what attention is, the ability to attend to things that are important to them. And, if social media is kind of governing everything that you do, right? Social media tells you to check this one thing, you check this one thing. Social media is telling you to see what your friends are doing, and you see what your friends are doing. And you like that, that's fine, right? If you like the political commentary or the rabbit holes or whatever it is that YouTube algorithm is going to get you at 3 in the morning or whatever it is, right? And that's great, and you like that, that's great, right? But the second you want to do something that you choose to do that doesn't have to do with what your phone's telling you to do, like I want to commit to that relationship and spend time with her. I want to, like, make a friend or, connect with this person or whatever. I want to see this movie. I want to do whatever it is. And it requires you to be able to attend to things beyond your phone. That's when things start getting really difficult, especially if it's long-term commitment and whatever it is. Your phones can be a huge distraction for that. And so, like, I don't want to be a part of the train of the lecturing of, like, of the goldfish thing, because I'm part of that, right? I've received that. I know what that's like. But from a lived kind of way, when I reflect on how that's not cool, like how that affected me, I'm reflecting on the kinds of conversations I could have had with loved ones, or my ability to, how that would affect family dynamics and my ability to connect with my siblings or with my parents. And looking back on that, it's real. It's real because it's, you grow up and you want your own autonomy. You want to live your own life. I don't want to do what my parents want to tell me to do. And they know that I'm going to live my own life. And all of a sudden I'm on my own and I can't control myself, right? I'm like scrolling at 3 a.m, whatever it is. If I'm not choosing that and I'm doing that still, I'm still attending to that, I can't focus on what I want to attend to, that sucks. That's not fun. And I think that's a lived experience that a lot of people in my generation go through. And we don't talk about it, So, but anyways, that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Let's jump to academics a little bit. So Ross, global PISA test scores, and this is what Dan was talking about in the beginning, have been falling since the early 2010s. One hypothesis is that technology is distracting young people inside of class, taking time away from homework and studying outside of class. So that's the opportunity cost that Ben was talking about. Teachers are also having to compete with high dopamine technology to get kids' attention. I don't know if there's any teachers here. I hear that all the time from you all. How does modern screen technology affect the learning environment for both kids and teachers?
That's just like a softball question. So I think it's really important to point out that my school's been phone-free for 6 years. And while we do see a lot of benefits that Graham mentioned, there are other screens, right? So they have laptops, and they play games on their laptops, and they figure out how to play games on their watches, and they will access any other screen they have. And so this statistic isn't just due to phones. It's due to technology altogether. What a lot of schools are doing, especially as we focus more on incorporating play and other things like that, is they're trying to lessen technology in the classroom. So I've seen English departments all over the country, because I get to travel all over the country too, going back to the little blue books. And while it is harder to read because now there's generations that can't write clearly, actually, but your notes, but handwriting, bro. Handwriting. And so while that has become harder, because we're going back to that world, it is more beneficial to the brain. Teaching and I am a teacher in the classroom every day, it now requires you as an educator to make your subject as interesting as you can, because you are competing with very high-edited, creative, evocative roles. One of the ways to do that, and one of the largest forms and oldest forms of education, is storytelling. And what's interesting about storytelling is, in the United States of America, you can get your bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in education, and not a single minute is spent assisting educators of how to use personal stories, of what's wrong about using personal stories, of what's right about using personal stories. And so you've created this, frontier that's been in existence as long as education, where some educators are oversharing everything, the divorce, the custody battle, all of it, or educators are scared to death and they're undersharing in moments where they really could connect. When you talk about focus, I see in many classrooms all over this country where educators are able to get students to focus because they are articulating and have learned how to break through all of this other stuff. So we can't always focus on the statistics and the negative pieces, but there are ways to empower people with concepts that are as old as humans that influence education. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
Thank you. I was going to skip this one, but I can't, because I have to just talk about some of the liabilities that schools should consider by having smartphones allowed to be used. I know, but we have to do this one.
Yeah. You're looking at them right now. The bullying, again, back to the laws. There are laws in each state that vary around bullying, and if it's happening on a school campus, it is the school's problem. If CSAM, child sexual abuse material, any nude photo or video of somebody under the age of 18 is uploaded to Google Docs on a school-issued Chromebook, that is a school's problem. Violence, exposure to problematic content, hate speech, predation, like the things that you hear about just in the news, they're happening on school-issued devices and accounts, and at a much higher rate than anyone might imagine. We have a case study that we release at BARC every year. Just over 2023, we analyzed over 5.6 billion data points on the rate at which children experience a variety of harmful content and people online. It's too high. It's too high, and it's happening on personal devices, and it's happening at school. And I don't think it's fair for administrators and teachers to have to not only bear that burden, in addition to, teaching and connecting with children.
Yeah, and then, I know it's right up here, but we have to talk about explicit AI. These are just 3 cases locally, but these are popping up all over the country, and they're growing.
It's so problematic, and it's escalating in occurrence, but I shy away from talking about it because parents are not ready to wrap their brains around AI-generated abuse. They still don't realize what's happening with actual photos and videos of their children.
Yeah.
They can't fathom it, but hey, we need to pay attention to it. When the FBI releases alerts and warnings around the rise in sextortion and the rise in AI-generated abuse, do you know how long it takes to get for just them to release a warning? How many instances had to have happened to release like a press release? It's too much. It's too much, and it's not getting any better. And we've got to get our heads out of the sand and talk to each other in real life and fix it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead for time here. I'm actually going to come back to you because I do want to talk about this. Because you speak to parents, you are a parent, I'm a parent. It's real that parenting is harder today than it was when we were kids. So according to a recent Pew poll, 2/3 of parents say parenting is harder than it was 20 years ago. Many cite technology like social media or smartphones as a reason. So can you speak to that a little bit? How do you see parents and teens struggling with issues surrounding technology?
Yeah, I'll start with a personal story that I feel like is applicable. I have spent my entire career working at the intersection of parenting and tech. I'm 43 years old. I know parental controls. I know settings. I have the candid conversations with my son. I started a Facebook group that now has over 500,000 parents in it called Parenting in a Tech World. I have all the ability and know-how to do this right, and I still don't know how to do it right. I'm still getting it wrong. Mm-hmm. I can't call my mom or dad and ask them, when should I give my child a smartphone? And when is Snapchat okay? And how do I deal with this cyberbullying stuff? No parent in the history of parents, at least that have lived on planet Earth, has ever had to deal with this. Parents, scientists, doctors, lawyers, legislators, we're all figuring this out in real time. We don't have what we need to do this right, so we've got to do this together, period.
Yeah. And we talk about this message all the time, but it's not any individual's fault. It's not the kid's fault. It's not the parents' fault. It's not even the school's fault. We're dealing with huge companies with very sophisticated algorithms that we're fighting with individually. And it's real. It really is real. It really is harder. Okay, back to you, Seán. So I want to talk about this idea of moral panic. I feel like I'm distracting everybody with my slides. So moral panic is the pervasive belief that some great wickedness is threatening society and must be stopped. So we've seen this before, and people make this argument, right? People were upset when the radio came out. People were upset when the TV came out, etc. So in your opinion, as a young adult, is the use of smartphones and social media by kids and teens a moral panic issue?
So I would say, we all feel that there is some detrimental effect that has occurred because of the implementation of phones and social media being a constant presence. And specifically, we can feel that this is having a detrimental effect amongst, kids in childhood. And what I've discovered that effect is the collapse of an entire social ecosystem. So to help you understand what I mean by that with an analogy, if you take an island in the Pacific, it's been developing its ecosystem for thousands and thousands of years, and the specific species of tree has a specific species of bird that eats a specific bug, and it all works in harmony, right? And if there was, a boat that rides by one day and drops off a beetle that's from all the way across the world that just started eating through all of the, the tree's roots because they don't have, they're not prepared to defend against that, and it's invasive. Then all the trees start falling down, and then the birds don't have houses, and then the birds aren't eating the bugs, and then everything collapses because the ecosystem has been infiltrated. So, phones and social media are the invasive species of our thousands of years of our human connection ecosystem. Phones haven't just collapsed, haven't just made a couple of species extinct. The introduction of phones and social media as a constant presence in our society has completely collapsed the social ecosystem that hosted our in-person social connection. And that's what I've seen to be the deepest piece of this issue.
And I'll just add to that, because parents do talk about this. Well, people complained about TV when we were growing up or whatever. But there's no other time in history where young people like you and you are rising up and saying, this is not good for us, we want change. That has never happened where young people are advocating for change with the technology of their time. So I'll add to that. Okay.
Annika, real
Yeah.
quick. It's me over here, Titania.
Oh, hi.
Hi. This isn't like when rock and roll came out in the 60s. This isn't like that type of moral panic.
Yeah.
When you have children dying every single day because of social media related harms, that's a problem. There isn't a single consumer product on the planet that wouldn't be recalled if just one or two people were harmed from it. So it's not a moral panic. It is a real problem.
Yeah. Thank you. Ross, I want to come back to schools a little bit. So according to a 2024 Pew poll, 72% of U.S. high school teachers say cell phone distraction is a major problem in the classroom. So what have you learned from your peers about this issue? I know you said that your school has been phone-free since the beginning, but how has designated Geffen Academy as phone-free from the start and teaching mental health help teachers and students learn?
Thank you for that. And just to back up a little bit, because I don't think it was mentioned in my bio, I work at Geffen. I'm a founding faculty member of Geffen Academy at UCLA, and we're a school for students in grades 6 through 12, and so I teach middle school and high school. That is my main job. The other stuff is a side hustle, but I do it. And so when we come to this idea of mental health and mental health education, what's really complicated is when I say the words physical health right now, all of you know what I mean. You all know that it's exercise, what you eat, your family history, how you take care of your body. But when I say the words mental health, you all think different things. Some of you think of homelessness. Some of you think of going to the spa and getting massages and facials. Some of you think of someone who's sad, and some of you think of people with severe mental illness. And that's a problem. If we don't have a common language about mental health that's similar to physical health in schools, then we are forever reacting to the problems instead of being proactive and preventative and on the same page. And so one thing that we try to do at my school is implement a common language for mental health so that there is a clear definition. So that you, much like you understand the difference between a sprained ankle and a broken leg or having a cold versus having the flu, you also understand that there's a difference between feeling nervous versus having an anxiety disorder, of feeling sad versus having clinical depression, and understanding the basics of brain development and understanding peer support. And when you build in a common language, what we have seen with our graduates is that when they get to college, they are far more prepared than anyone else at that college. They have a language for mental health, they can identify when someone needs help, and they don't have the stigma because they've had 7 years of education that normalizes mental health for them. And I just want to be clear about this last point. Schools cannot be therapy centers. Schools have taken on every single issue possible, and what they can be is places where students learn about mental health the same way they learn about physical health. They can learn about it from a health education place. UCLA has over 60 years of physical health literacy data that shows that when people can name their body parts, identify what's wrong with their physical health, they seek help sooner, and they normalize those conversations. We are just at the precipice of beginning of mental health literacy, but I do think the two have to tie together. We can't just have phone-free schools and hope everyone figures it out. If we're going to move to phone-free schools, we should be complementing it with some education that gives us a similar language to navigate every challenge that people are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm glad, Titania, you already broke the ice on this with the emergencies. But let's talk about parent pushback on phone-free policies. So I'm going to come back to you, Graham, actually. Parents are often the ones that push back on the phone-free policies because of emergencies. And we all know what that means. Elephant in the room, school shootings. Security experts agree phones are not helpful in a true emergency because they're loud, they're distracting, they breed information. Titania covered some of this already. And, again, I know you can't put a number on fear, but the odds of death from a school shooting are 1 in 5 million. So you have more of a chance of getting attacked by a shark, being in a plane crash, the list goes on, struck by lightning, etc. The risk of depression is 1 in 4, the risk of anxiety is 1 in 5. So, after all that, what would you say to parents that are worried and push back on the idea of phone-free schools?
Well, I think first, it's very natural, and I understand. I mean, I'm a parent, I have a young child, so I think it's the most natural thing in the world to be thinking that way. The landscape has shifted dramatically, is what we've seen in the last 3 to 4 years, to the point where now I think it's widely understood by security experts around the U.S. that in an emergency situation, students are not safer for a lot of reasons now. The main issues are that when something like that happens, an emergency situation, you want young people paying attention to the adult in the room and following directions. The other part that we talk about with schools, and what we hear all the time from safety and security directors who are actually bringing Yondr into schools, is not all the time are parents aware of the day-to-day violence that's happening because of and through the phone, and how many distractions and disturbances that causes. The vast majority of fights are orchestrated through the phone. So there's kind of the day-to-day element of those situations. The other is, if you're in a large city like a New York City or anywhere else like that, there's things happening around campuses all the time, and there are lockdowns that are incredibly common. And what you'll hear from safety and security experts is what they don't want is misinformation being sent to parents and having parents showing up on campus constantly throughout the day, and misinformation that can interfere with protocols. So it's a natural, I think, response. Everyone feels a sense of wanting to be connected and communicate with each other in the event of an emergency, but I think the landscape has really changed in the last 3 to 4 years in our understanding of that. And also it's important to note that when we work with schools, every student maintains possession of their phone. And that's important because if there is a lockdown, they're never separated from their device. They can unlock their pouch and they can use it. So you're addressing those safety concerns, but also not separating students from their phones.
So I want to make sure we leave time for questions. We're sort of at time. Amy, what do you think? Should we do a couple more panel questions or should we go to audience questions? Do you guys have a lot of questions? You want to raise your hand if you have a question so we know? Okay, there's not that many. I'm going to do a couple more panel questions and then we'll go to your questions. And right over here, they've set up a mic. So actually, this would be a good time to maybe line up if you have a question. Okay.
Young people, ask a question. You guys in the back?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That was bad.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, I'll come to you. I'm going to come back to you, Ben, actually, right now. So Dr. Anna Lemke, who's the author of DopaMind Nation, talks about the idea of self-binding strategies. So these are barriers between yourself and an addictive substance. Teens check their phones 100 times a day, a quarter of them are online almost constantly. So why do adolescents need self-binding strategies to have a healthy relationship with technology? I know you have your own personal self-binding strategies that you use.
So they don't. Not all adolescents do. It's really annoying. My girlfriend has no problem with Instagram. She goes on Instagram every once in a while and looks at reels of cute bunnies and rabbits and whatever, maybe a hippopotamus, I don't know. And she gets on it. She gets off. It's no problem. She doesn't need a self-binding strategy. I, on the other hand, watch those videos and then stay up late at night still watching those videos. So I need self-binding strategies. Yeah, so I use an e-reader, I use a light phone, and I also have a smartphone. I'm able to do the whole social media thing, all my work and stuff like that. But if I want to walk out of the room and I don't want my phone on me, I can do that. And yeah, because I have a dumb phone. That's what this thing is. So it doesn't have access to the internet. But if my mom needs to call me, she can. She doesn't, but, you know, whatever. Yeah, so, but anyways, social media affects different people in different ways, right? And so it's more of an individual problem, an individual question of what do you want to do, what kind of life do you want to live, and is social media or these tools becoming a problem for that? It 1,000% was for me, right? Like, she doesn't run into these problems. If I start scrolling at you know, past what, like 11 o'clock at night, I will be up at 4. You can you know, bet a quarter on it, right? I will do that. So I need those self-binding things, and they work really great for me. I'm really happy for it because it allows me to focus. I mean, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was at 8, and then I was part of a longitudinal ADHD study, so I keep getting diagnosed across, you know, every couple of years and stuff like that. So I have a vulnerability, and there's plenty of people here who have vulnerabilities too. If you've been in a family with someone with a mental health problem, you know, or whatever it is, you know what their trigger is, right? Yeah, you know, you see that on social media, it can be a big problem. So anyways, some people need them. Not all, but some definitely do.
Graham, I'm wondering, in our podcast, you talked about this, which really stuck with me, this idea of technology being a very physical thing because it ties into your nervous system. Do you mind adding to that a little bit about the way that a self-binding strategy can break the compulsion loop?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who've written about this in the past. Someone like Marshall McLuhan has talked about this and his idea of how the medium you interact with affects your nervous system, and his idea that like media was an extension of the human central nervous system. What I've observed and what I think we see is if you watch people texting, you're watching a cartoon that's hypervisual, very flashy, that has an effect on you. And my perception has been that technology, its influence on people, it affects your patterns of thoughts, your interpersonal relationships, privacy, a lot of things we've talked about. But the tie is mostly physical. And if you can interrupt that impulse, it's an impulse as simple as reaching for your phone in the pocket and you feel a pouch or something that interrupts it, that allows space for your brain to kind of form a new pathway. And it opens up. It's a new habit is what you're creating, and you're allowing a new habit to emerge, and that has a lot of knock-on beneficial effects. And that's what I've seen over 10 years watching people enter shows and go through that experience is a very physical experience. And it tends to lead to new habits being formed, which I think can ultimately lead to healthy habits.
Can I give an example of this? Okay, I love this thing. This is my favorite. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. It gets me all giddy. I have an e-reader. It's basically like a really bad iPad. If you wake up on your phone and you scroll a bunch and stuff like that, and like when you try not to do it, you wake up and you just like lay in bed and you don't know what to do. I read a book on my e-reader and it's great, right? I have my phone charged away and then I have my e-reader here and I don't want to get up and it forces me to read. It's phenomenal. Oh my gosh, right? Like if you ever wished you could just replace scrolling with reading, it's awesome. I remember I was reading into this thing and I learned it had an internet connection. My heart dropped. I was like, oh no. And then I saw that the refresh rate was so awful you couldn't watch YouTube in it. I literally leapt out of my chair. I was like, yes! And so I bought this thing, and it's phenomenal. You know, it's phenomenal. So, and I would not, I promise you, the desire is in my heart, but I would not be reading all these different books, all these different important things, if it was on an iPad where I had YouTube, because I just, you know, it gets me. So, yes, he's 100% right. There you go. Self-binding strategy.
Let's go to questions, and if we'll have time, I'll ask a couple more questions. So, hi. Do you want to go first?
I can talk loudly.
Oh.
I have no problem.
Oh, sorry. I thought there was a microphone. Should I bring mine over?
I don't need one, as most people can attest to. My name is Dr. Olga Damascus. I have a senior as well as a 7th grader, and it's okay. And I'm curious. I thought this was going to be about phones in school, but you've only said 3 things about phones in school, because what you're talking about is technology in general. So take the computers out of the schools, make teachers teach, use books, paper, pencils. Take the screens out of the school, because a kid being on a phone in between classrooms or at lunchtime is minimal compared to how much screen time they get having to stare at an iPad, an iMac, whatever you want to call it, in school. The teachers aren't teaching from paper. Kids don't know how to write. Kids don't know how to read. Kids don't know how to interact with each other because they're sitting with laptops on their desks. So I think the phone is the easy thing to pinpoint because it gets you books sold, it gets you products sold, it gets you talking engagements, TED Talks, whatever. What it doesn't do is address the real issue, is that teachers are not teaching children to interact by I'm a social studies, okay? My kids did projects. I did not allow computers in my schools. I didn't allow them in my graduate classes. So students had to, of all ages, actually interact with each other, speak to each other, not look at a screen, but they had to pay attention. Because you can say, oh, I'm looking at a screen, I'm doing my work. No, you're not, you're watching soccer. So instead of just trying to pick the little easy thing that gets everybody money, pick the thing that is, take the computers out of schools. Take them out, teach kids to write cursive. Teach them to read a book. Teach them to hold a book, to touch a book, to smell a book.
Okay.
Then you're gonna get your social interaction.
I'm not sure what the money comment is, but this sounds like a policy question, so maybe Dan or Bennett, not to put you guys on the spot.
You
But
talk about AI. There was an AI pornographic issue here that the school and the district threw under the rug. The girl cannot show her face here.
yeah.
So you're dealing definitely with policy. You're dealing with a district that doesn't want to deal with it.
So,
I do. I thought, well, she's from
well, we're
policy.
not the district. We're
Well, I
like,
know, but I'm saying you're talking about phones. It's not. It's a bigger issue. You're dealing with districts that don't
so
want to deal with
I
it.
would say, unless somebody wants to be brave, Ross, and take this, this is really an administrative question. So we're just talking about the mental health benefits of removing, and the academic distraction and things like that, of removing smartphones from school, even between classes. That's what we're talking about. We're not covering tech in schools, but unless Ross wants to take it, I think this is like a principal superintendent question.
But the phone isn't the issue.
She's upset about technology in classrooms.
Yeah, and to agree with what she's saying, we've talked a lot about technology, and she's asking like, if just removing phones is still going to keep laptops and distractions and things from people. So when you look at the research of the 3 evolutions of the brain, from language to reading to technology, it's the technological age that's activating the limbic system and all those other aspects. So yeah, I can't speak to removing laptops and everything else, but I think I think what she's saying is we've addressed technology a lot and spoken about phones as a small piece of it. And she's saying the low-hanging fruit is to blame the phone when the larger societal movement has been technology. I don't know. I do know some schools, obviously, that are removing all of technology, and they're seeing different impacts with that, especially on mental health. I don't know of any district-wide or national movements that are trying to remove technology. I don't have that. Look, I don't have that answer, but I understand the focus on the phone.
And maybe your money comment was about ed tech? Is that what the comment was?
You're selling a product, you're selling books. If there's money involved in all of this for people to take out a phone, what's the money involved in taking out a laptop?
I think I can speak to this a little bit. I make a little bit of money off TikTok because they pay me for the views and stuff like that, but I don't get that much from it, and I don't sell anything. So I went to a special education school growing up, so I was multiple years behind for my age, in terms of my grade, my social standing. All my friends were younger than me, my emotional intelligence. I struggled a lot. And it was a very special school, kids with autism, ADHD, Asperger's, anger issues, social issues, whatever it is. I went to that school for 7 years. There was 130 kids for the whole entire school, 1st through 8th grade, 6 kids in a classroom, right? It was very, very specialized. And we needed computers. My handwriting was so atrocious that, like, you just couldn't, I had dysgraphia, you couldn't read it. And so I firsthand have experienced how electronics can be really helpful. I have also firsthand experience, looked over my shoulder and remember seeing Josh, like, watching YouTube videos as the teacher's over there on the computer, and so I've seen how that's been harmful too. I don't know if phones are the low-hanging fruit. I get the sense from my personal experience and from the stuff that I'm reading here, if we're taking them on good faith, in my experience too, I do think that phones are a real big culprit here, and that's the 20% that'll knock the 80%. But I do think you have a good point that it's up to implementation. It's up to us to work together, right? It's up to the schools to do well on this. It's up to parents to work well with the teachers, right? And there's a divide there that's really rough. And I just empathize so much for what it must be like now to be a parent. And also, oh my gosh, I could not imagine being a teacher, right? Have you ever spoken in front of a Zoom call where like no one says anything and like everyone has the camera off? It's just hell, right? It's like a special version of hell. And then teaching in front of a class where everyone's looking at their phone, I could not imagine the purgatory. It would be awful. So I hear the kind of the pain here that we need to address this problem. But I do think that phones are a good solution, a good starting point. Maybe it's a low-hanging fruit, but I don't think it's a financial thing. As me, who's not making money as this.
There's different elements to why a phone would be the low-hanging fruit.
And you are totally right that there are other problems to this and it needs to be a matter of implementation, but I do stand by the people here who are on this panel doing valiant work around, pointing at the phone needs to be first. We need to make phone-free schools. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for your question.
And one more thing before we go to the next one. We could do a whole hour on EdTech. EdTech did explode exponentially, as did iPad sales and everything else during COVID. We all went through that. Many schools adopted, gave everybody a Chromebook, whatever it was, and never went back. So maybe that's part of the sentiment too, I don't know. But I think that's a whole nother hour. And you and I were talking, did you say Finland is removing laptops or all tech? Did you say? I'm not sure, that's what I read. Oh, okay. So, we are seeing the pendulum go back a little bit, but I think we can go to the next person. Hi.
Thank you. Alex Panina, I'm a father of a sixth grader. First of all, I wanted to thank the panel, extremely interesting discussion. And also wanted to thank the district for organizing this event. And the food in the beginning was great. I'll get to my question, it'll be very short, but also a scary observation that's a huge area and not a lot of people. And the event was advertised pretty well. We signed up maybe a couple of weeks ago, so I'm sure the word was out, but I'm just wondering why there's so few people who chose to participate. Even though
Me too. I thought there was going to be a bunch of young people here.
Anyway, here's my question. Again, a lot of information covered, but can you, maybe Ross and Titania, a few practical advice as to A, how to explain your child that he's not going to get his phone until 8th, 9th grade, right? Also, what is, in your opinion, what is the normal allotment for time for the free screen time, and if there is any room for any sort of social media until whatever the age you think is appropriate. So just kind of make it practical.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great questions. So the first thing is how to talk to your kids about this. Love using analogies. There's a reason why I don't give my 3-year-old the full carton of ice cream and a spoon and say, have as much as you want. You decide when you've had enough. Is ice cream great? Heck yeah. But we need to be mindful of what, just analogies. Same with like cars. Cars, awesome tech, right? But you need seat belts, you need car insurance, you need red lights and green. We have to be, as parents and caregivers, we have to help our children navigate tech safely because tech is neither good nor bad, it's a tool. So use analogies. It's not a you versus them, it's a you and them together navigating what's best for them. In terms of screen time, I'd say the general rule, always defer to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Great recommendations there. But we as humans, if we are physically able to move our bodies, we need to be moving our bodies. We do not need to be sedentary for long periods of time, and certainly not in front of screen. It's less about time also, but what is the experience? Is it passively consuming content, on Netflix that isn't educational? No offense to Netflix. Or are you using it to authentically connect and learn and create? Again, tech is a tool. It's neither good nor bad. Finally, in terms of social media, when and if to introduce it, you gotta look at the data. What we see is that there are much more harms than benefit to children accessing it at younger ages. If you can wait until 16 or even later, great. Just because the social media companies say that you need to be 13 years of age to use their platforms doesn't mean that that's the right age for that child. It's up to each individual child. And it's not that social media is all bad. I love social media. I would not have connected with these fine humans if it weren't for social media. But we can't just blindly hand our children access to the entire world before their bodies and their minds and their hearts are ready for it.
I think the other thing that I would only add to that is one of the hardest things for parents is boundaries. You said that young people are really good at sales. I would say that a child's job is to manipulate their parents into making them do things they want. And it starts from birth and it continues all the way into adulthood. And the deepest neural pathways we have are with our families. No one can trigger us quicker than our families, than our parents, than our siblings, than any other interaction, right? So one of the hardest things that parents can ever do is put up boundaries, because the child's job is to just break the boundary. And once you give an inch on that boundary, well, that's the new norm, because you did it one time, and remember that one time you did it, and I did this, right? So when it comes to tech, it's just got to be extremely strict boundaries. Modeling behavior is also really important in that, but that's the only thing I would add. Everything she said is great.
Thank you.
I think I would say just really quick as well, like I was one of the few kids that didn't have it in my middle school. You know, I eventually got it in high school, and, you know, I'm glad that I didn't have it. And I think there's a lot of, like, you know, it's tough because there's a lot of pressure. Your kid is going to ask you, and they're going to want it from you, like, a lot, and they're going to pester you about it, and they're going to, like, beg and manipulate. And, you know, if you don't give in and you make the choice to not give it to them for them, even though it's unfortunate that everyone else will have them be excluded, they'll thank you, you know, because you're going to look back and they're going to go through all the experiences they're going to go through. They're going to be like, why did you give this to me? So I think, you know, making that choice for them before they know, it's good for them, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate what you've done tonight to spread awareness, and thank you to Las Virgenes School District as well. I'm actually from the Conejo Valley School District, so I sort of snuck in, but they said I could come, so I'm the district next door. I have 2 kids. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been seeing ages 17 to 30 for the last, since 2008. This is the hardest thing. I mean, this is the hardest part of parenting. As a parent, I will say, this is the hardest part of parenting. As a young person, this is the hardest part of navigating the world. We should not have to do this alone at all. There's so much shame around how we're parenting in this area, and I guess it's more of just like a comment that just a couple months ago, I started a group locally. If you would like to join, I would love to have you. It's really centered around Las Virgenes and Conejo Valley. It's called the Conejo Valley chapter of MAMA, which stands for Mothers Against Media Addiction, but it's for parents who just want to have more real life experiences. And so I would love for you to join. You can come see me after. You can also go to joinmama.org. It's a national organization that is just against addiction to media and just really about injecting more connection and community. So more things like this, more discussion, more dialogue, more data, and yeah. So not a question, but thank you so much, and please come see me if you want to join. I'd love to have you just for some, the support and the camaraderie and just doing this parenting thing together. I just think we cannot put all of these restrictions on, really, if we're the only family out there doing it. We need each other. So thank you for being here, all the people who did show.
Yes. Hi. First of all, I'm really heartened to see this kind of presentation. And I'm excited that people are paying attention to this. I've been sounding the alarm, sounding like Chicken Little for a decade now. And I have 3 boys, 2 of them have ADD. And I see such changes in them based on electronics use. And my 14-year-old is in high school, at a girl high school now. And he is so driven to get on a phone constantly. And when word first came out that LAUSD was shutting down the phones, and then word came that LVUSD did, we got, I had parents like, oh, this is so great, they can't use their phones anymore. The next day, first period, I'm getting a request for Brawl Stars time, from school, in class. So definitely something has to change, and maybe it's the Yondr bag. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not being implemented yet. For my son, I get daily requests from school, from class. Everybody else has it. I need more Brawl Stars time. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to hearing how it's going to be implemented. The other thing I want to speak to is, I know it's a super complicated problem, and as Seán was saying, I think it needs to be a whole school thing. It needs to be everybody, but as you can see from the crowd here, you're speaking to the converted already. Like, there aren't, I don't know why there aren't more people who care about this and that see the effects on the kids. And I just want to mention the computers. I look at my son's history sometimes, and he is in class on Snapchat, on games, asking ChatGPT questions. And 6 years ago when they brought it into my youngest 5th grade class, and they brought the laptops in, I was looking at his history and fighting with him constantly to try to get him back on the Zoom, looking at the teacher, and it was a constant fight. It was a full-time job trying to keep him focused. And I was asking, can we put filters on these school laptops? Can we put something to take the games out, the social media out? And Jim Klein said we couldn't, and that there was nothing to do. And when we were back in school, it was the same thing. We couldn't do anything about Roblox being played in the middle of science class. So I hope that we figure that out too, because my son is doing everything. When I take all his screen time off, he's doing it on his computer. And I know that we need computers in the classroom in some ways, but I hope that there's a Yondr or a filter or something that helps work on that computer end, because the phone will not, just putting the phone away isn't gonna completely solve the problem.
Can I get that one? I feel like I'm talking too much. Am I talking too much? Can I get that one? I'm good? I'm good? Okay, cool. I don't think you could have got me. If I wanted to go on Snapchat, I was going to go on Snapchat. And I think just an honest acknowledgement, you guys, including parents and the school administration, do not have the tools that you need, right? This stuff is moving way faster than you guys can imagine right now. It's just going incredibly fast. And then also, we're the guys growing up with it, right? So we know it like the back of our hand. And so they probably did block Snapchat on the Wi-Fi or whatever it is, because they blocked it when I went to middle school. And, but we use a VPN, or we figure something else out, or whatever it is. Or you find some different solution and stuff like that. The parental tools are very limited. This is why we need stuff like this. We need a light phone, these other things. But you're fighting a battle that, I'm not surprised that you're losing, because I know what it's like, the position that I'm in, and those people in the back know, there's a lot of options that we have available to us. So first off, I just want to acknowledge that, because, it's not anything bad on you. I'd say the one thing I just think is so important, and it's I kind of feel bad saying this, because I feel like it would be really difficult for someone to convince me when I was 14. But when people have done it and it's worked well, it was so important to get me to understand by framing it in things that I cared about, right? So Brawl Stars is what your son cares about. That makes a lot of sense. I cared about Clash Royale or whatever it is, right? That was my little fix thing. And it took a while for me to not want to play that. But anyways, what really helped me was having things that I personally cared about that was outside of this. So phone free is not banning phones. It's opening up, it's freeing up the possibility that you can have other things that you're interested in that we know leads to better outcomes, like having friends, connecting with people after lunch, or getting physical movement in, or whatever it is. So I think that's really important to emphasize in Jonathan Haidt's work, he talks about the anxious generation. I was a late-stage editor for that book. What he talks about is it's not that we want to say that social media is bad. It's not that we want to say that we need to get rid of phones, right? We do for younger people, but just in general, the broad stance on social media is that when people are younger, right, we need to replace the time that's being spent on social media with independence, with going outside or whatever it is. And so I think that's I mean, I bet you've already caught that football and ran 200 yards with it, right? So, but that's just what I'd say. It's so important. I think the other thing that I think is important to acknowledge that hasn't been said yet, I feel kind of weird saying this because there's mostly parents, but when I've talked to people of my generation as to what's kind of the difficulty that comes up for you when you know that you want to use social media less, because most of people of my generation, when you talk with them one-on-one, they're not in a group like this, they don't want to do this. They hate this. They don't like this. Or they don't hate it, but you talk with them and they're like, yeah, no, I kind of socially compare. They know that it's kind of problematic, right? One thing that consistently comes up, though, when they talk about what happens when you talk with your parents about it, over and over and over again, I get, well, they're on their phones. And they're on their phones all the time, right? And I just, so it becomes this whole thing where one person says it, then another person says it, then the whole crowd says it, where it's like, my parents don't even understand social media. They're on it all the time. Or why can't they tell me to try and stop using my phone as much, right? When they're on Facebook all the time or whatever it is, right? Getting off social media is hard for a 14-year-old ADHD, right? And so it's hard. Of course they're going to go on Snapchat on their computer, but it's also hard for adults to do it, right? So adults need to be able to practice this too. And then if you're walking in the same territory, I think that really helps. The last thing I'll say, and I know I'm taking a bunch of space, I'm an airhead right now, right? The last thing I'll say is that your son using Snapchat on the computer is way better, right? It's way better than a phone, right? The feedback that you're getting when I'm thinking about when I'm alone and my parents aren't looking after me anymore, right? It's me on my own, right? Me using some of these apps on my computer is a way better dealio in terms of the autonomy and choice that I have as compared to when it's on the computer. Not to say that isn't,
but not during class.
That's
he's doing it during school, just all the way down. And it's like you had mentioned the opportunity cost.
Absolutely.
And Dan had mentioned boredom. There is no boredom. There's no time to imagine, to innovate, it's like every moment, and especially for these ADD boys, is this compulsive, I've got to get my phone. And we're like the outlier parents who are saying, no, you can't use your phone. But like you said, everybody else is, so it becomes this constant battle. So hopefully it will become a whole school thing and they won't be able to use the phones, but I hope also we can figure out something on the computers to make it less of a thing that all day they're in front of their computer.
Social media companies need to be held accountable. They're not, right? So the 13-year-old age sign-up thing, that was COPPA. The only time that federal legislation has been passed to protect youth mental health online was in 1998. That was 43, now I believe 44 congressional hearings ago. I attended some of them. I've seen in the flesh and blood the CEO of Snapchat. I've seen Twitter. I've seen Mark Zuckerberg. I've seen these different people, walk into the room and dodge questions in front of senators and representatives that are tagging them and stuff like that, right? So I've seen that, and then I've seen, after going to that congressional hearing, after joining the advocacy groups that prepped some of the senators to ask good questions, then on TikTok, the one senator that asked a dumb question about if the CEO of TikTok is Singaporean Chinese, that getting blown up, and then people going crazy about that. So I don't think my heart has sunk ever more than that. But anyways, you guys are losing. I can't begin to imagine the position that you're in right now, because these tech companies are not held accountable at all. So this is a federal problem, and you guys will be given the tools once federal legislation is passed. So the Kids Online Safety Act is something that the advocacy organizations that I've been a part of and working on for a very long time. Seán, you were there with me at Capitol Hill advocating last Wednesday. So it's been a battle, it's been a long thing, but that's in my personal opinion, the change that needs to happen. That needs to happen on the federal level.
Thank you, good luck. And I hope you get somewhere with it.
Okay, no more.
I just want to add one more thing. You can't lock it down. These are adult products that we're giving to our kids. parent controls are retrofits, right? They're like Band-Aids, but kids are smart. They're going to know how to get around them. So this is a much bigger conversation, but just know that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annetta Prince. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been primarily practicing addiction psychiatry with some process addiction included in that. And I feel like I've been just kind of, preaching to nobody for the last 5-6 years about this, because I really do feel like, we know in addiction psychiatry that, once upon a time the cigarette was thought to be the gateway drug. You started at 12, that meant really bad things. You started at 14, that meant bad things too. 12 was much worse, kind of predicted further future addictive behaviors. To me, it feels like the cell phone is the new cigarette, and it's starting at like toddler age. So I'm hoping at some point you'll be able to put out like a visual, whether it's AI or whatever, of literally like a 2-year-old with a cigarette and be like, I guess I'm hoping that you're also speaking to preschool parents and elementary school parents, because by the time I have a 13 and a 15-year-old, they're both 2 girls. By the time we're at this point, I feel pretty demoralized because it's like, I can't, the teachers must feel the same way. It just feels like a losing battle. It's pretty difficult, and the struggle is very real, and I'm in your parenting in a tech world group, and yay, it's great, and it's still hard. Like, people are struggling, the kids are struggling, and it is a really, really significant addiction. I work still with a lot of really, kind of your basic addictions, like the ones that are up on the screen. And I always ask about screen addiction as well, because they really go together with the other ones as well. So I guess really the main question is, will you be going to the middle schools as well? I know this is actually supposed to include the middle schools. And will this campaign kind of keep working to address parents with younger kids? Because that's where it starts. Yeah. By the time they're in high school, I feel like, it's really hard to kind of get them back. Yeah. But elementary school, pretty good.
Yeah, actually, I can speak to that, because when we started in elementary school for the very reason you're talking about. Once you get to middle and high, those habits have set in. Yeah. And at that point, because I've done the parent as at that age, and it just becomes a support group of people just feeling like they don't have hope. Right? Like, you can't, once you let that genie out of the bottle, it's really hard to put it back in. So then it becomes more about boundaries and maybe smaller changes you can do. But absolutely, we start in preschools, because it starts with the parents. The parents are the front line. Schools are the second line to solving the collective action problem. But I don't blame parents. It's the status quo. If everybody else has whatever it is, the iPad, the phone, it's really, really hard to fight against the system. But absolutely, at the elementary level, we believe in teaching kids about their bodies, honestly. The brain science, here's what's happening to your body. We talk about the food metaphor and how we can have healthier choices. I think Titania brought that up. So, and I think Ross talked about mental health education as well, is super important, because these things they're tied into your feelings as well. And if a kid can understand why he's feeling great when he has his iPad and why he's feeling not so great when it's taken away. And by the way, that's brain science. It's called homeostasis. We call it the feelings teeter-totter. That's huge, because regardless of what parents are doing, and I agree to whoever talked about the parent habits, that's huge. But regardless of what parents are doing, we believe kids can make good choices if you give them the education.
Yeah.
So.
And the basis of everything being developing healthy relationships, right, which you spoke to quite a bit, which 100%, kids are losing that, and they don't know how to navigate that without screen-free time. So I'm really glad that you guys are doing this. I think it's amazing, and if we can get legislation to say, hey, phones are illegal, like cigarettes are until a certain age, that would be amazing. So maybe you can help promote that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much. I'm a mom. My daughter's here, and I'm just really excited because I think this is an amazing opportunity to create what we want, to create a new platform, to create a new world. This is a great time to change education and to bring new things to the forefront. We went through COVID
The world went through COVID. I was cleaning my groceries. We were all cleaning our groceries. How far are we from that now? Does anybody still clean their groceries? We can do this. We can do this. We need a protocol. We need a team that can come together and say, like, I loved what you said about the ecosystems, because we need to create a new ecosystem. We need a team of experts who are going to come to a school like this and say, this is what we have to do. What are your problems? And this is how we have to solve them. Because, like, for example, they use social media for athletic groups, for music, for dance, for whatever, to give messages. Okay, we're going to have practice, we're going to have performance. So their groups are on social media. So even if you try to stay away from it, or a parent takes the phone away for a certain amount of time, the kids are still connected to it. Or they have to do research through they're not doing research in the library, they're doing research on the computer. And like, my daughter, when she's on it a lot, she gets headaches, she gets eye strain, so it's affecting them physically. And when we ask the question, why is this room empty? When we start to see more damage in our society, there's going to be a line out the door of people waiting to get in here because they're going to want answers. We have to have hope, and we have to hold that space. We cannot be here and just talk about the problem. I had an aha moment. I'll leave you with this. When my daughter told me that because of ChatGPT, teachers are now handing out packets of work. So in each subject, they have like 10 pages, and they're actually going back to writing, and they have to write their essays in class. That is incredible. The teachers are collectively reversing what's going on organically. So I hope that we leave tonight with an ounce of hope and ideas of solutions that we can bring forward. And I'm really excited if I can be part of any of this. I'm not connected to anybody or anything. And I'd love to know all your names again, because I didn't have my phone to take pictures. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bernardo. We have a senior student here at Calabasas, and our home environment is also a learning environment. So as we all return home, my question to you is, how do we deal, how will you deal, and how can we help you deal with the withdrawal symptoms or syndrome that this taking away of this drug that has polluted the nutritious air of technology will be felt by our students, so that we can empower them to self-regulate and understand the difference between the pollutant and the polluting content and the shackles that they are experiencing, that they think are important in their lives, so that they can better take advantage of the benefits of the technology in an iPhone, any smartphone, and the computing systems. That's the question for you. Oh, and how will the district continue integrating the parents so that we have a successful program, okay, at the end of this effort, and not an attempt that ends up failing? I assure you, we will continue having the technology, and my peers at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA, we take advantage of those successful engineers and scientists who take advantage of the technology without being distracted by that kind of pollution. Thank you.
Sorry, do you want to answer the question about withdrawal real quick, or is that?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to, have you ever seen withdrawal from implementing a phone-free policy during the day?
Yeah, I've seen the first withdrawal was 10 years ago at shows, seeing adults actually having the physical withdrawals and actual panic attacks coming out of a show because they had never been separated from their phone for maybe the last 6 or 7 years. So the first actually instance I saw was in adults. What we hear from parents whose students go to a phone-free school and trying to take those habits back to the household, the most successful things we've heard is defining physical spaces and then filling the spaces that are phone-free inside that house with activities that are engaging, whatever those are. So it's playing music, board games, whatever your family might normally do. But the delineation of spaces, almost like going back 10, 15 years to maybe a computer room, a TV room, and not allowing those things to permeate throughout the entire house, to me is one of the things we've found to be most successful, because again, technology doesn't really knock at the door and ask permission to enter a space or an experience. It's there and it fills up the room. So creating those physical boundaries, but then filling the gap that creates, the vacuum, with things that are engaging or exciting, is something we've seen. The only other thing I'll say, in schools in particular, as we launch, there are students who will wrestle with withdrawals, and they'll go through an experience that first week. Sometimes parents will say, well, my student has issues related to anxiety and they need access to their phone. We understand that. Usually those parents will come back a couple weeks later and find that their students becoming less anxious as they're separated from the phone. But what we generally hear is that by the school not having to deal with all the issues that come up with phones every single day, they're able to attend to those students going through that experience for the first 2 weeks of those kind of withdrawals and deal with those and help them get over the hump. So I hope that kind of answers your question from my perspective, at least.
And also remember that the most predominant theory right now is that with the rise of technology and social media, there's been a correlate of a rise of mental health issues, right? That's the predominant theory that most people are aware of, but there are many other theories. And one of the other theories that's getting some attention now is that the rise of mental health issues has also gone with the plummeting of belief in anything bigger than yourself, that social media has become the religion. And there's a fascinating thing I do with my students every year where I just ask students, how many of you believe in something bigger than yourself? And that doesn't have to be organized religion, it could be spiritual, it could be anything. And in general, students who don't believe in something bigger than themselves have far worse mental health outcomes than students who do. So in addition to everything he said, because it was perfect, there is also a need to have community to believe that it's worth something. Because if you're any age and you don't believe that there's something bigger than you and all you have is your phone and social media, it's a pretty bleak life. It's a pretty lonely life. The last thing I would say is, when we were starting Geffen Academy, I was talking to a head of school at a private school in the Northeast, and I was like, hey, I'm starting a school, is there anything I should know? And he looked at me, he's like, get ready for the question of, what will a school do? And I was like, well, that's kind of a lot. And he was like, because it's going to come up for everything. If something has a bus stop, what's the school going to do? If there's something huge in the world, there's a war, what's the school going to do? If there's something else, what's the school going to do? And then we started our school, and I was like, oh, that guy was right. I only say that because in addition to what the school does, it's going to be families, teachers, everyone trying to come together. And your question isn't wrong at all. It's very apt and appropriate, especially because schools are making this effort. But to this point about what you do at home, what you do at home is also going to play a really huge piece.
I could say something too. I know he's been talking too much. Oh my gosh. Okay. Speaking of like kid withdrawal, could you give your kid, I don't know how old, wait, how old is your kid?
She's 17.
She's 17, okay. So could you give her $100, pair up with a friend, and drop her off at a shopping center or Walmart without a phone, and tell her, I'll be back in 3 hours, you spend it on whatever you want, just have fun, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to do that, but what I'm saying also is like, talk about like phone withdrawal. When you were 14, did you have a phone? Could you go out and do your own thing and out and be in the real world? Like, autonomy is so important. A big reason why there's not this crowd isn't filled right now with like young people is because social respect and like feeling like you fit in or feeling a sense of respect, feeling a sense of autonomy is so important when you're that age. It's so important, right? Having a sense of autonomy. You can have a sense of autonomy if you're on your laptop on Snapchat. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that like if I'm, everyone's telling me to do whatever else, but I want to play Brawl Stars with my friends, that's my way of being autonomous. That's how the cigarettes companies got us, or got young people, not me, my generation specifically, but because they knew that in their marketing, right? There's great research reports on this that, if you got a kid to think that this was the way that they would show that they had autonomy over their own body, they're not going to care if their teeth goes yellow. They're not going to care about their lungs. They could tell you. You could go to the skate parks and interview the people who are smoking cigarettes, and they could tell you all these different health facts, but they didn't care because it was a part of their autonomy. It was a part of their own choice. So I would just say, what are you replacing it with? And that's so important. When I didn't know that I was struggling with social, I just thought, I didn't know I was lonely for so long. I was just scrolling on my phone. It was like this pacifier for me. I had no idea. And I just thought, it's because it's an addictive technology. It's because it's built into the apps or whatever it is. And then I met my girlfriend, and then I spent 2 weeks hanging out with her because we were actually met online. Speaking of good effects of these things, I met my girlfriend online, spent 2 weeks with her, and all of a sudden I realized my phone wasn't addicting. I didn't check one notification, one ping. And the second I got back, I wanted to start doing that again. And I realized, shoot, right? It's not just that it's not just that it's addicting, but it can fill a hole. It can fill a hole of not believing in something bigger than yourself. It can fill a hole of not being around people, right? And I found, as someone who struggles with ADHD and struggles so much with this attention stuff, I can still have TikTok on my phone, but I know if I'm up late using it, it's not because of TikTok. It's because of something that's missing in my life, right? And that's allowed me to then spend time to prioritize more connecting with other people, or that's allowed me for whatever it is. So I would just say, where do they get their autonomy? Where is the two young people here? Where do they get their autonomy? If you're taking away their phones, what else are they doing? Are they able to go to the park alone? Or do they not have their smartphone? Are they able to do that? What can they do that you're not a part of, that you're going to allow them to develop the skills to handle a social situation or whatever it is? Okay.
Thank you. If I can, are we over, Annika? Can I?
You wrap it up.
Okay.
I was just going to say we are over, and thank you for everyone staying so late, but...
Yeah, I was just going to say, the conversation here, because we're talking about elementary school, middle school, high school, it is kind of this war of I'm taking it away against your will and withdrawal and all that. My organization creates phone-free social events for college students that choose to show up to an event that they know they're going to give up their phone at. And, that is because, we don't see it as, we're going to have withdrawal, we're losing something. Because when you keep the integrity of a phone-free space, that is what allows, not having your phone to be a freedom. Because, if one student is going to school without a phone, that's not sustainable. That's why you need, the entire school to be phone-free. But, as far as this attitude towards, this fight of having it or taking it away, eventually, I believe and I hope to see that it is actually a student's right to an unpolluted school with constant presence of phones, because same way it is now our right to walk into any restaurant or go on any airplane or work in any office building without having to breathe in smoke in the building with people smoking indoors. I believe that it should be our right to have spaces that are phone free for our own social health, and I think that's going to be important. And then that changes the conversation, because now then your students and your kids are coming home saying, oh my gosh, like Graham was saying, after a couple of weeks they're feeling less anxiety. Once you get over that hump and you experience what is on the other end of it, it's actually much more freeing. And I think that will change the conversation a little bit from such a fight to what we gain from not having them.
That's it. Thank you, everyone, for staying so late and giving us your attention spans.